They bullied her for being deaf, but she was only pretending for years. What if the person sitting next to you in complete silence could hear every cruel word you whispered about them? What if their disability was nothing more than a masterfully crafted lie, designed to shield them from a world too painful to face? The morning sun filters through the tall windows of Meadowfield High School, casting long shadows across polished hallways that echo with the familiar symphony of teenage chaos. Lockers slam shut like gunshots, sneakers squeak against linoleum floors, voices merge into an indistinguishable roar of gossip, laughter, and the casual cruelty that teenagers wield like invisible weapons. But moving through this storm of sound is a figure who seems untouched by it all. 17-year-old Lila Bennett glides through the corridors like a ghost navigating between worlds. Her long, dark hair falls like a curtain around her face, creating a barrier between herself and the chaos surrounding her. She carries a worn leather notebook pressed against her chest, not just a school supply, but a lifeline. Her eyes, deep brown and startlingly observant, scan the hallways with the practiced efficiency of someone who has learned to read the world without participating in it. To her classmates, Lila is the deaf girl, the one who sits alone at lunch, methodically eating her sandwich while sketching intricate drawings that no one ever asks to see. The one who never raises her hand in class, never participates in group projects unless forced, never speaks above a whisper, if she speaks at all. Teachers have learned to communicate with her through written notes and gentle gestures, their voices softening with that particular brand of pity reserved for those they believe cannot hear their words. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. But what none of them know, what none of them could possibly imagine, is that Lila hears everything. Every whispered joke at her expense, every eye roll when she passes, every conversation about her supposed disability. The sound waves that should bounce harmlessly off her supposedly damaged eardrums instead pierce straight through to her consciousness, filing themselves away in a mental archive that grows more extensive with each passing day. She hears the way Madison Clark, Meadowfield's self-appointed queen bee, discusses her like she's a piece of furniture. God, why does she always sit there staring at nothing? It's so creepy. She hears her chemistry teacher, Mr. Peterson, tell the principal that accommodating deaf students is more trouble than it's worth. She hears the guidance counselor suggest to her foster parents that perhaps Lila would be more comfortable in a specialized school for the hearing impaired. Each word lands like a physical blow, but Lila's face remains impassive. Years of practice have taught her to absorb verbal violence without flinching, to let cruelty wash over her like rain against a stone. Her notebook becomes her refuge during these moments. Pages filled not just with homework assignments and class notes, but with detailed observations about the people around her. Who cheats on tests, who spreads rumors, who pretends to be friends while plotting betrayal. The truth is that Lila's silence isn't born from inability, it's born from choice. A choice made 7 years ago when the world became too loud, too painful, too dangerous to engage with directly. Her deafness is a carefully constructed fortress, built brick by brick through years of dedicated performance. She studied real deaf individuals, learned to mimic their mannerisms, perfected the art of reading lips just well enough to respond appropriately when necessary. Her foster family, the Hendersons, bought the illusion completely. They learned basic sign language, rearranged their home to accommodate her supposed needs, and spoke about her condition in hushed, sympathetic tones when they thought she couldn't hear. They're kind people, the kind who take in damaged children and try to heal them with patience and understanding. They have no idea that the child they're trying to heal is hiding behind a lie so comprehensive it has become her second skin. At school, Lila moves through her day like an actor playing a role she's perfected over years of rehearsal. In English class, she watches Mrs. Davidson's lips carefully while secretly listening to every word of the lecture on Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. The irony isn't lost on her, studying a book about prejudice and hidden truths while living the ultimate hidden truth herself. She takes meticulous notes, not because she needs to read lips to understand, but because it maintains her cover. During lunch, she sits at her usual table in the far corner of the cafeteria, apparently absorbed in her sketching while actually cataloguing the social dynamics playing out around her. She watches Madison's inner circle, Jessica, Taylor, and Brianna, coordinate their daily campaign of psychological warfare against anyone who dares to exist outside their narrow definition of acceptable. Today's target is sophomore Emma Rodriguez, whose crime is wearing the same brand of shoes as Madison, but in a different color. "She's literally trying to copy my style." Madison's voice carries across the cafeteria, deliberately loud enough for Emma to hear. It's so pathetic when people can't come up with their own identity. Lila's pencil moves across her notebook page, capturing not just the scene, but the cruelty behind it. She documents these moments like a war correspondent recording atrocities, not for immediate action, but for some future reckoning that she can't quite envision yet. If this story reminds you of something you've experienced, share your experience in the comments. It might touch someone's heart today. The afternoon brings chemistry class, where Lila pairs with whoever's left after everyone else has chosen their lab partners. Today, it's Marcus Chen, a quiet boy who speaks to her in the exaggerated way people use with those they believe can't hear properly. He's not cruel, just awkward and uncertain like most people when faced with what they perceive as disability. "Can you understand if I talk slow?" he asks, his words unnaturally spaced. Lila nods and points to the lab instructions, guiding their experiment through careful gestures and written notes. She could speak, could make this interaction normal and comfortable, but normal stopped being an option for her long ago. Instead, she plays her part while listening to Marcus whisper to his friend Jake at the next table, "I feel so bad for her. Imagine never being able to hear music or movies or anything." The irony cuts deep. If only he knew that she hears the music he's humming under his breath, the whispered conversations, the subtle sounds of chemical reactions bubbling in their test tubes. If only any of them knew that her world is full of sound. It's connection she's chosen to sacrifice. As the final bell rings and students flood toward the exits, Lila packs her notebook with the same methodical precision she applies to everything else. She's survived another day behind her wall of silence, collected another set of observations, added more entries to her mental catalogue of human behavior. But as she walks toward the school buses, something feels different. There's a tension in the air, a shift in the familiar rhythms of her carefully controlled world. Madison and her crew are clustered near the main entrance, their laughter carrying a sharper edge than usual. Their eyes follow Lila with an intensity that makes her skin crawl, though her expression remains neutral. Now breathe deeply and prepare yourself for a journey that might change the way you see the world. She doesn't know it yet, but the invisible threads holding her secret together are beginning to fray. 7 years of perfect performance, 7 years of living behind a lie designed to protect her from the world's cruelty, are about to be tested in ways she never imagined possible. Because some secrets are too heavy to carry forever, and some wounds too deep to heal in silence. And sometimes the very shield we create to protect ourselves becomes the prison we can no longer escape. But what Lila doesn't know is that her carefully constructed world is about to collide with a truth from her past that will shatter everything she's built and force her to confront the moment that started it all. 7 years ago, 10-year-old Lila Bennett believed the world was fundamentally good. She believed that adults would protect children, that families stayed together, and that speaking up when something was wrong would make it right. She believed these things right up until the moment she watched her mother die. The memory lives in her mind, like a film reel that plays without warning, triggered by unexpected sounds or sudden movements. It begins on an ordinary Tuesday evening in their small apartment on Maple Street, where the walls were thin enough to hear neighbors arguing and the radiator clanged like a ghost in chains. Her mother, Sarah, was humming while cooking dinner, something she did every night, a habit that made their cramped space feel like home. Lila was sprawled on the living room carpet, colored pencils scattered around her like fallen autumn leaves, working on a drawing of their family. In her 10-year-old artistic vision, they were all holding hands in front of a house with a white picket fence, the kind of house her mother promised they'd have someday when things got better. Her stepfather, Derek, wasn't in the drawing. Even at 10, Lila understood that some people didn't belong in dreams of better tomorrows. The sound of Derek's truck pulling into the driveway always changed the atmosphere in their home. It was like watching storm clouds gather. You knew rain was coming, but you never knew if it would be a gentle shower or a devastating hurricane. That night, the slam of his door echoed with more violence than usual, and Lila's hand froze over her drawing. "He's early," her mother whispered, more to herself than to Lila, but the words carried the weight of someone who had learned to fear irregular schedules. Derek stumbled through the front door, and the smell of alcohol preceded him like a warning flag. His construction clothes were dirty, his face flushed with the particular rage that came from a combination of workplace humiliation and liquid courage. Lila had seen this version of Derek before, unpredictable, dangerous, looking for someone weaker to absorb his failures. "Where's my dinner?" he demanded, though it was barely 6 o'clock. "Almost ready," Sarah replied, her voice carrying that careful neutrality she used when trying to defuse a bomb. Just a few more minutes. But Derek was beyond de-escalation. He grabbed the pot from the stove, barely cooked pasta and all, and hurled it against the wall. The crash was deafening in their small kitchen, but what followed was worse. The silence of two people afraid to breathe. "You think you can just make me wait, like I'm some kind of dog?" Derek's voice escalated with each word, and Lila pressed herself lower against the carpet, wishing she could disappear entirely. What happened next unfolded with the terrible clarity that trauma burns into memory. Derek's hand struck Sarah's face with a sound like a branch snapping. She stumbled backward, and Lila watched her mother, the woman who sang lullabies and braided her hair and promised everything would be okay, transform into someone small and frightened. "Please, Derek, not in front of Lila," Sarah begged. And that's when Lila realized her mother knew she was watching, but Derek was beyond hearing pleas. His fists found their target again and again, and Sarah's attempts to shield herself became weaker with each blow. Lila wanted to run, to help, to scream, but her body seemed frozen in place. She could only watch as the person she loved most in the world crumpled to the kitchen floor. The sound that would haunt Lila forever came next, the wet, terrible thud of Derek's boot connecting with her mother's head. Sarah's body went still in a way that even a child could recognize as final. The humming stopped. The promises of white picket fences stopped. Everything that made their apartment feel like home stopped in that single, devastating moment. Derek stood over Sarah's motionless form, his chest heaving, reality slowly penetrating his alcohol-fueled rage. "Sarah? Sarah? Get up!" His voice changed from anger to panic, to something approaching terror. "Come on, baby! I didn't mean... Sarah!" But Sarah would never respond to his voice again. Her eyes, once bright with dreams and determination, stared at nothing. Blood pooled beneath her head like spilled paint, spreading across the linoleum floor they had mopped together just that morning. Lila found her voice then, a scream that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her lungs. It was raw, primal, the sound of a world breaking apart. But Derek spun toward her with wild eyes, and she saw in his face that she had become a witness to something that could destroy him. "Shut up!" he hissed, advancing toward her. "Shut up right now, or you'll end up just like her." The threat hit Lila like a physical blow. In that moment, she understood with terrible clarity that speaking, the thing that had always been her right, her power, her connection to the world, had become dangerous. Words could get her killed. Sounds could bring violence. Her voice, raised in grief and horror, had made her a target. So she stopped screaming, she stopped talking. She retreated so far into silence that when the police arrived 20 minutes later, called by neighbors who finally couldn't ignore the sounds of violence, they found a little girl who seemed to have lost the ability to speak entirely. The next hours blurred together like a nightmare that refused to end. Police officers with kind eyes and gentle voices tried to coax words from her, but Lila had learned that words were weapons that could be used against you. Social workers explained that she would be safe now, that Derek was going to prison, that they would find her a new home. But safety felt like a foreign concept to someone who had watched the safest person in her world die while she stood helpless. In the days that followed, as she was shuttled between temporary placements and medical evaluations, something remarkable happened. The adults around her began to speak differently when they thought she couldn't hear. They discussed her case with raw honesty, revealing truths about the system, about her options, about her future that they would never have shared with a hearing child. "Poor thing's probably traumatized into selective mutism," one social worker told another. "Could take years of therapy to get her talking again, if ever. The hearing tests are inconclusive," a doctor explained. "Could be psychological, could be physical trauma from the shock. Either way, she's not responding to auditory stimuli." Lila discovered that being perceived as deaf gave her a strange kind of power. People spoke freely around her, assuming she couldn't understand their conversations. They revealed their frustrations, their prejudices, their plans for her future, without considering that she might be absorbing every word. When the Hendersons, a childless couple in their 40s who specialized in fostering children with disabilities, welcomed her into their home, Lila made a conscious decision that would shape the next 7 years of her life. She would remain silent, not because she couldn't speak, but because silence had become her armor, her shield, her way of controlling a world that had proven itself capable of unthinkable cruelty. The Hendersons were everything Derek wasn't: patient, gentle, genuinely caring. They learned sign language for her, created visual schedules, spoke to her with the kind of respect she had never experienced before. Their kindness almost broke her resolve several times, especially during those early nights when nightmares would wake her screaming and Mrs. Henderson would hold her until the terror passed. But even in moments of genuine love and safety, Lila couldn't bring herself to speak, because speaking meant admitting that she had heard every word her mother begged for mercy. Speaking meant acknowledging that she had done nothing to help. Speaking meant breaking the protective silence that kept her from having to explain why she had frozen instead of fighting, watched instead of acting, survived while her mother died. So she perfected the performance. She studied deaf children at her new school, mimicked their mannerisms, learned to read lips just well enough to respond appropriately. She became so skilled at her deception that even medical professionals were convinced. Hearing tests became elaborate theatrical performances where she simply chose not to respond to sounds. The irony was that her fake deafness gave her abilities that truly deaf people could never possess. She could hear the whispered conversations about her progress, the discussions about her placement, the casual comments about her limitations. She became a spy in her own life, gathering intelligence about a world that thought it was hidden from her. Years passed, and the lie became easier to maintain than the truth. The Hendersons loved the child they thought they were helping. Teachers respected the challenges they believed she faced. Classmates either ignored her or treated her with the careful politeness reserved for those they saw as disabled. Everyone played their part in the elaborate fiction Lila had created. But lies, even necessary ones, have a weight of their own. Each day of pretending added another layer to the burden she carried. Each moment of genuine kindness from people who thought they were helping a disabled child added guilt to her growing emotional debt. Each time someone treated her with the special consideration reserved for the hearing impaired, she felt like a fraud, stealing compassion meant for people who truly needed it. Now, at 17, Lila has lived more than a third of her life behind this wall of silence. The traumatized 10-year-old who watched her mother die has grown into a young woman whose entire identity is built on a lie designed to protect her from a pain too deep to face directly. But protection always comes with a price. And Lila is about to discover that some costs can't be calculated until the bill comes due. Because the same silence that has shielded her from the world's cruelty has also made her the perfect target for a different kind of violence. The casual, everyday brutality that teenagers inflict on those they perceive as different, weak, or unable to fight back. Madison Clark rules Meadowfield High with the precision of a corporate executive and the ruthlessness of a medieval queen. At 17, she has perfected the art of social warfare, understanding instinctively that true power comes not from what you can build, but from what you can destroy. And in her perfectly curated world of designer clothes, strategic friendships, and calculated cruelty, Lila Bennett represents something Madison cannot tolerate, someone who exists outside her sphere of influence. The campaign begins subtly, as the most effective violence always does. It starts on a Monday morning in October, when autumn leaves crunch underfoot like broken promises, and the air carries that sharp bite of approaching winter. Lila sits in her usual spot in the cafeteria, methodically eating her sandwich while sketching in her worn notebook. The drawing taking shape on the page is of a bird in flight, wings spread wide, breaking free from an invisible cage. Madison's voice cuts through the cafeteria's background noise like a blade through silk. Have you ever noticed how some people just exist without purpose? She says to her inner circle, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry to nearby tables while maintaining the illusion of a private conversation. Like, what's the point of taking up space if you're not actually contributing anything? Jessica Martinez, Madison's lieutenant and eager accomplice, follows her queen's gaze to where Lila sits alone. Oh my God, you mean the deaf girl? She's so weird, just sits there drawing all the time. I mean, I get that she has a disability, Madison continues, her tone dripping with false sympathy. But doesn't she have any ambition, any desire to do something with her life? It's just sad. The words hit Lila like physical blows, each syllable precisely aimed to wound while maintaining plausible deniability. Madison is an expert at this game, speaking about her targets in third person within earshot, using language that sounds concerned rather than cruel to any adult who might be listening. Lila's pencil continues moving across the page, but her strokes become more forceful, pressing deeper into the paper. She hears every word, feels the eyes of Madison's followers turning her way, senses the subtle shift in atmosphere that always precedes a hunting expedition. But she maintains her mask of oblivious concentration, playing the part of someone lost in her own silent world. Maybe we should try to help her, suggests Taylor Brooks, the newest member of Madison's group, and still naive enough to believe their leader's actions stem from genuine concern. Like, invite her to sit with us or something? Madison's laugh is musical and sharp. Oh, honey, you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. Trust me, I've tried being nice to her. She just stares at you with those creepy eyes and goes back to her little drawings. Some people are just unreachable. The lie flows so smoothly that even Taylor nods in understanding. Madison has never attempted kindness toward Lila, or anyone else for that matter. But she understands that her followers need to believe their cruelty serves a purpose, that their queen is benevolent even when she destroys. Over the following days, the campaign escalates with surgical precision. Madison's attacks are never direct. never obvious enough to trigger administrative intervention. Instead, she employs the death by a thousand cuts approach that has made her legendary among the student body. In the hallways, Madison's group begins walking in formations that force Lila to step aside or risk collision. They time their movements to intersect with her path, creating a dance of intimidation that appears accidental to observers but feels deliberately choreographed to their target. When Lila moves to avoid them, they exchange knowing looks and whispered comments about how strange and antisocial she is. "Did you see how she just ran away from us?" Brianna Chen asks, loudly enough for other students to overhear. "We were literally just walking to class. Why is she so paranoid?" The genius of Madison's approach lies in its subtlety. To anyone watching casually, Lila appears to be the problem, the antisocial girl who avoids normal interactions and seems to create drama where none exists. Madison positions herself and her followers as the reasonable ones, the normal teenagers just trying to navigate high school while dealing with someone who makes them uncomfortable through her very existence. In chemistry class, the persecution becomes more targeted. Madison, who has never shown interest in academics beyond maintaining her GPA for college applications, suddenly develops a fascination with their shared laboratory period. She positions herself at the station directly behind Lila and Marcus, close enough to provide running commentary on their experiments. "I wonder if she can even understand what we're doing," Madison muses to Jessica, her voice carrying that particular theatrical quality of someone pretending to whisper. Like, "Chemistry is so much about verbal instruction. How do you learn about molecular reactions if you can't hear the explanations?" Marcus shifts uncomfortably, glancing between Lila and Madison with the awkward awareness of someone caught in the crossfire of social warfare. He's not cruel, but he's also not brave enough to challenge Madison's implied authority. Like most students at Meadowfield, he has learned that neutrality is the safest position when Madison Clark sets her sights on someone. "Maybe she just memorizes everything," Jessica suggests, playing her part in the performance. "That must be so limiting, though. Like, what happens when you encounter something new?" The conversation continues as if Lila is merely an object of academic curiosity rather than a person sitting 3 feet away. They discuss her supposed limitations, her presumed challenges, her imagined deficits with the casual cruelty of scientists discussing a lab specimen. Every word is chosen to minimize her humanity while maximizing her otherness. Lila maintains her focus on the experiment, measuring chemicals with steady hands while her heart pounds against her ribs. She wants to turn around, to look Madison in the eye and speak the words that would shatter this entire elaborate fiction. She wants to say that she hears every poisonous syllable, understands every calculated insult, recognizes the deliberate campaign to isolate and diminish her. But speaking would mean abandoning the protection that silence has provided for 7 years. It would mean confronting questions she's not ready to answer, facing a past she's not prepared to revisit, and risking the carefully constructed safety net that has become her entire identity. So she stays silent, absorbing the abuse like a sponge, soaking up toxins, filing away each insult in the growing catalogue of Madison's cruelty. The attacks spread beyond direct encounters. Madison's influence extends throughout the school's social ecosystem like a virus, infecting casual interactions with subtle poison. Students who have never spoken to Lila begin treating her differently, some with exaggerated sympathy, others with barely concealed irritation. "I don't understand why she doesn't just go to a school for deaf kids," someone says behind her in the lunch line. "Wouldn't that be easier for everyone?" "My mom says inclusion is important," another voice responds, "but it's kind of awkward, you know? Like, you never know if you're supposed to talk to her or just pretend she's not there." These conversations happen around Lila constantly now, as if Madison's campaign has given everyone permission to discuss her like she's a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. She becomes the subject of theoretical debates about disability, education policy, and social responsibility, all conducted within her hearing range by people who assume she cannot participate in discussions about her own existence. The psychological impact is devastating in ways that physical violence could never be. Madison understands that bruises heal, but the wounds inflicted by systematic dehumanization can last forever. By making Lila's mere presence a topic of public discussion, Madison transforms her from a person into a problem, from a fellow student into a burden that the school community must collectively shoulder. Mrs. Henderson notices the change in Lila's behavior at home. Her foster mother, who has spent years learning to read Lila's non-verbal communications, sees the new tension in her shoulders, the way she flinches at unexpected sounds, the dark circles under her eyes that speak of sleepless nights. "Did something happen at school?" Mrs. Henderson asks during dinner, using the careful sign language they've developed over their years together. Lila's response is a non-committal shrug, but her foster mother isn't fooled. She sees the way Lila picks at her food, the way her attention drifts to the window as if she's planning escape routes. Mrs. Henderson makes a mental note to contact the school, to check with Lila's teachers about any changes in her environment, but Madison's campaign is too sophisticated for adult detection. Her attacks leave no evidence, create no documentation, generate no formal complaints. She operates in the gray areas of teenage interaction, exploiting the complex social dynamics that adults can rarely understand or effectively monitor. The isolation intensifies. Students who might have shown Lila casual kindness now avoid her entirely, unwilling to risk association with someone who has become a social liability. Madison's influence has created an invisible quarantine around Lila, marking her as untouchable in the complex hierarchy of high school survival. And through it all, Lila continues her performance. She attends classes, completes assignments, maintains the facade of the quietly determined disabled student, overcoming obstacles through inner strength. But behind her carefully controlled exterior, something dangerous is building. Because Madison has made a critical miscalculation. In her campaign to isolate and diminish Lila, she has forgotten that the most dangerous person in any room is often the one who appears to have nothing left to lose. 7 years of silence have given Lila abilities that Madison cannot comprehend. She has learned to observe without being observed, to listen without appearing to hear, to catalog weaknesses and secrets while maintaining the appearance of harmless innocence. Madison sees a victim, but she's actually created something far more dangerous. A witness with perfect recall, unlimited patience, and absolutely nothing left to protect except the truth itself. But the Queen of Meadowfield High is about to learn that some people's silence isn't submission, it's preparation. 3 weeks into Madison's campaign, Lila's world has shrunk to the size of a prison cell. The hallways that once felt merely unwelcoming now pulse with active hostility. Every glance feels like surveillance. Every whispered conversation sounds like conspiracy. Every laugh seems directed at her expense. But Madison Clark is just getting started. The escalation begins on a Wednesday morning that starts like any other. November has arrived with its promise of winter darkness, and the school's fluorescent lights cast everything in harsh, unforgiving detail. Lila sits in advanced placement English, where Mrs. Davidson has assigned presentations on Harper Lee's exploration of prejudice and social justice, ironic subjects for someone living under the weight of systematic persecution. Lila's presentation is scheduled for today, and she's prepared meticulously. For weeks, she's crafted a visual presentation about the power of silent witnesses in literature, complete with detailed poster boards and carefully selected quotes. It's her way of participating without speaking, of contributing to class discussions while maintaining her protective silence. She arranges her materials at the front of the classroom with practiced precision, each poster board positioned to tell a story about characters who observe injustice from the shadows. Her classmates settle into their seats with the usual mixture of boredom and relief that someone else is facing the spotlight, but Madison has other plans. As Lila begins her presentation, pointing to her carefully crafted visual aids, while Mrs. Davidson reads her written notes aloud, Madison raises her hand with theatrical concern. "Mrs. Davidson, I'm having trouble following along," Madison says, her voice carrying that perfect blend of confusion and well-meaning concern that makes her so dangerous. "I mean, I want to understand Lila's perspective, but it's kind of hard when we can't hear her actual thoughts on the subject." The classroom falls silent except for the humming of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of hallway activity. Mrs. Davidson pauses, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this is taking, but uncertain how to respond without appearing dismissive of either student's needs. Lila has chosen to present her analysis visually, Mrs. Davidson explains carefully, which is perfectly acceptable given her circumstances. "Oh, I totally understand that," Madison continues, her tone dripping with false empathy. "It's just that, like when we study literature about voice and speaking truth to power, shouldn't we actually hear from different voices? I'm not trying to be insensitive, but isn't there something ironic about a silent presentation on the importance of breaking silence?" The question hangs in the air like poison gas, seemingly reasonable on the surface, but deadly in its implications. Madison has managed to weaponize academic discourse, using the very themes of the literature they're studying to attack Lila's supposed disability. It's a masterpiece of calculated cruelty, disguised as intellectual engagement. Several classmates shift uncomfortably, sensing the violence beneath Madison's words, but lacking the vocabulary or courage to name it. Mrs. Davidson looks trapped between competing pedagogical principles, supporting her disabled student while also fostering open classroom discussion. "Perhaps," Madison continues, pressing her advantage, "Lila could try using sign language. I mean, if she really wants to communicate her ideas, wouldn't that be more authentic? We could all learn something." The suggestion lands like a physical blow. Madison is calling for Lila to perform her disability, to put on a show of sign language for the entertainment and education of her hearing classmates. She's demanding that Lila prove her deafness through elaborate performance, while framing the request as inclusion and understanding. Lila's hands begin to tremble, barely perceptible to most observers, but Mrs. Davidson notices. The teacher moves closer, placing a protective hand on Lila's shoulder. "Lila's presentation stands as submitted," Mrs. Davidson says firmly. "Now, let's discuss the themes she's highlighted about the power of observation and witness." But Madison isn't finished. She's tasted blood, and her predatory instincts are fully activated. "I just think it's unfair," Madison says, her voice taking on a wounded quality that immediately generates sympathy from some classmates. "Like, we're all required to speak for our presentations, to engage verbally with the material. But Lila gets special treatment. I'm not saying it's her fault," she adds quickly, "but shouldn't the standards be the same for everyone?" The genius of the attack lies in its apparent reasonableness. Madison has positioned herself as an advocate for academic integrity, someone courageously raising difficult questions about fairness and equality. She's managed to make Lila's accommodation appear as unfair advantage rather than necessary support. "That's actually a really good point," whispers Jake Morrison, loud enough for others to hear. "I mean, if I tried to do my presentation without talking, I'd probably fail." The virus of Madison's logic spreads through the classroom like wildfire. Students who have never questioned Lila's accommodations suddenly see them as preferential treatment. The protective barriers that teachers and administrators have carefully constructed around Lila begin to crumble under the weight of perceived injustice. Mrs. Davidson attempts damage control, explaining the principles of universal design and reasonable accommodation, but the seed of resentment has been planted. Madison has successfully transformed Lila from a student deserving support into someone gaming the system for advantage. After class, the real devastation begins. Madison corners Lila at her locker, flanked by her usual entourage. But this time, she's brought props, her phone, already recording. "Hey, Lila," Madison says brightly, her voice artificially cheerful for the camera. "I was thinking about what you shared in class today, about the power of silent witnesses. It got me thinking, maybe you could teach us some sign language, like help bridge the communication gap." She holds up her phone, clearly documenting the interaction. Several other students gather around, drawn by the novelty of seeing Madison Clark, apparently reaching out to the school's most isolated student. "Come on," Madison encourages. "Just show us how to say hello or thank you in sign language. It would be so educational." The request seems innocent enough to casual observers, but Lila recognizes it for what it is, a trap designed to humiliate her on camera. If she attempts sign language, Madison will undoubtedly find ways to mock her efforts. If she refuses, she'll appear uncooperative and antisocial. Either response will be weaponized against her. Lila closes her locker and attempts to walk away, but Madison follows, phone still recording. "Oh, come on, don't be shy," Madison calls out, her voice carrying through the hallway. "We're just trying to learn about your culture. Isn't inclusion what we all want?" The word culture hits like a slap. It's like a... Madison is reducing Lila's supposed disability to an exotic curiosity, something to be explored and consumed for the entertainment of hearing students. She's othering Lila even further, making her not just disabled, but foreign, strange, separate from the mainstream student body. Maybe she doesn't want to help, Jessica suggests, right on cue. Some people just aren't interested in building bridges. The implication is clear. Lila is selfish, unwilling to share her resources or educate her peers. Madison has flipped the script, making herself appear generous and open-minded while painting Lila as closed-off and uncharitable. But the real catastrophe comes later, during lunch period. Lila sits at her usual table, trying to focus on her sketchbook, while the cafeteria buzzes with its usual chaotic energy. She's drawing frantically now, using art as an escape from the psychological pressure that's been building all morning. The image taking shape on the page is darker than her usual work, a figure trapped behind bars made of reaching hands. That's when Madison strikes with surgical precision. She approaches Lila's table carrying a small bottle of black ink, the kind used for art projects, and positions herself directly in front of Lila's chair. The timing is perfect. Lunch period, maximum audience, phone cameras ready. "Oh my God, Lila, I'm so sorry," Madison exclaims as she accidentally spills the entire bottle of ink across Lila's sketchbook, destroying hours of careful work in an instant. The black liquid spreads across the page like spilled blood, obliterating the intricate drawings that represent Lila's primary form of expression and emotional release. Months of artwork, personal reflections, and private thoughts disappear under the expanding stain. But Madison isn't finished with her performance. "I feel terrible," she continues, her voice pitched to carry across the cafeteria. "Here, let me help you clean this up." She grabs paper napkins and begins rubbing at the ink, making the damage exponentially worse. Each swipe spreads the stain further, grinding the liquid deeper into the paper, destroying not just the current drawing, but several pages beneath it. "I'm so clumsy," Madison says to the gathering crowd. "But at least she can't hear how embarrassed I am right now. That's kind of a blessing, right? Sometimes it's better not to know how people react to your mistakes." The comment is perfectly crafted, appearing to seek comfort while actually highlighting Lila's supposed isolation. Madison is performing guilt while simultaneously reinforcing the idea that Lila's deafness makes her less aware of social dynamics. Less connected to the community around her, students crowd around the scene, some filming on their phones, others offering half-hearted sympathy. But no one questions whether the spill was truly accidental. Madison's reputation for precision and control makes genuine clumsiness seem unlikely, but challenging her would require the kind of social courage that few teenagers possess. Lila stares at the ruins of her sketchbook, watching 7 years of private thoughts and artistic expression dissolve into unrecognizable black smears. This notebook wasn't just a collection of drawings, it was her voice, her outlet, her way of processing a world that had become too painful to engage with directly. The destruction is more than vandalism, it's a violation of her inner sanctuary. Maybe you should be more careful about where you sit, Madison suggests helpfully, still dabbing uselessly at the spreading stain. These art supplies can be dangerous around important work. The threat is subtle, but unmistakable. Madison is establishing that nowhere in the school is safe for Lila, that her creative expression can be destroyed at any moment, that even her most private thoughts aren't beyond reach. As students begin to disperse, returning to their own lunches and conversations, Madison leans close to Lila's ear, close enough that her whispered words wouldn't be picked up by any recording devices. "Oops," she breathes, so quietly that only someone with perfect hearing could detect it. But Lila hears every syllable. The single word confirms what she suspected all along, that Madison's campaign isn't random bullying, but calculated terrorism. The accident was intentional, the destruction deliberate, the humiliation carefully choreographed. Madison knows. Somehow, impossibly, Madison Clark has figured out that Lila can hear. The whispered "oops" is a declaration of war, an announcement that the game has changed, a promise that much worse is coming. As Madison walks away, her laughter floating back like smoke from a fire, Lila sits frozen in her chair, surrounded by the wreckage of her artistic voice and the growing certainty that her 7-year performance is about to face its ultimate test. Because if Madison knows her secret, then the protection that silence has provided is already crumbling. And soon, very soon, Lila will have to decide whether to maintain her lie or finally, dangerously, speak her truth. But she has no idea that tomorrow's school assembly will force that decision in the most public, devastating way possible. The Meadowfield High Auditorium holds 400 students, but this Thursday morning, it feels like the entire world is watching. The monthly assembly about celebrating differences and building community was scheduled weeks ago, but fate has transformed it into the stage for the most dramatic revelation in the school's history. Lila sits in the third row, her ruined sketchbook replaced by a generic spiral notebook that feels foreign in her hands. Around her, students chat and laugh with the casual disregard of teenagers who believe nothing truly consequential ever happens at mandatory school assemblies. But Lila can feel electricity in the air, the kind of tension that precedes storms and earthquakes and moments that split time into before and after. Principal Rodriguez takes the stage with his usual combination of forced enthusiasm and administrative exhaustion. Today, we're celebrating the diversity that makes our school community stronger, he announces to a sea of half-listening faces. We have several student presentations about overcoming challenges and finding your voice. The irony is so sharp, it could cut glass. Lila has spent 7 years perfecting the art of voicelessness, and now she's trapped in an assembly about finding courage to speak. The universe, it seems, has a cruel sense of timing. Madison sits 2 rows behind Lila, surrounded by her loyal court. From her vantage point, she can study her target like a predator, evaluating wounded prey. Ever since yesterday's accidental ink spill, Madison has been watching Lila with renewed interest, looking for cracks in the facade, testing the boundaries of her elaborate performance. The first presentation is about a student's struggle with dyslexia. The second focuses on a senior who overcame anxiety to join the debate team. Each story follows the predictable arc of obstacle, struggle, and triumphant self-advocacy. The audience provides polite applause while mentally planning their weekend activities. But Madison has arranged for a different kind of presentation entirely. For our next segment, Principal Rodriguez announces, consulting his notes, Madison Clark has prepared a special tribute to one of our students who embodies the spirit of quiet strength. Lila's blood turns to ice water in her veins. She watches in growing horror as Madison takes the stage with the confident stride of someone who has orchestrated this moment down to the smallest detail. A PowerPoint presentation loads behind her, and the first slide reads, Silent Strength, Understanding Our Deaf Community. Thank you, Principal Rodriguez. Madison begins, her voice carrying the perfect blend of sincerity and educational purpose that makes her so dangerous. Today, I want to talk about someone who has taught our school community so much about resilience and determination. The next slide shows a photograph of Lila, taken without her permission, obviously from a distance, sitting alone at lunch with her sketchbook. The image is artfully framed to emphasize her isolation, making her appear vulnerable and disconnected from the vibrant school life happening around her. Lila Bennett has been part of our community for 3 years, Madison continues, and in that time, she's shown us what it means to navigate the world without one of our most basic senses. She's never asked for special attention or sought recognition for her challenges. Lila feels every pair of eyes in the auditorium turning toward her. 400 students and 24 faculty members suddenly focused on her presence with laser intensity. She wants to sink into her chair, to disappear entirely, but Madison's spotlight has made invisibility impossible. But I think it's important, Madison says, advancing to the next slide, that we truly understand what our deaf students experience, how they communicate, how they connect, how they find their voice in a hearing world. The next slide shows carefully researched information about deaf culture, sign language, and advocacy. It's academically sound, politically correct, and utterly devastating in its implications. Madison has turned Lila into a case study, a representative of an entire community, a symbol rather than a person. So today, Madison announces with theatrical generosity, I'd like to invite Lila to join me on stage. Let's give her the opportunity to share her experiences with us directly. The auditorium erupts in encouraging applause. Students and teachers beam with the self-satisfied glow of people participating in an act of inclusion and understanding. Principal Rodriguez nods approvingly, clearly pleased that his students are taking initiative in building community awareness. But Lila recognizes the trap for what it is. Madison is forcing her into an impossible situation. Either maintain her deception under the most public scrutiny possible, or reveal the truth and face questions she's not prepared to answer. Either choice leads to catastrophe. Come on, Lila, Madison calls out, her voice warm with encouragement. Don't be shy. This is your moment to educate us, to help us understand your world better. The applause intensifies, becomes expectant, demanding. Lila feels the weight of 400 gazes pressing down on her like physical force. Teachers are nodding encouragingly. Students are smiling with anticipation. Even kids who have never shown her any attention are joining the chorus of support. Slowly, mechanically, Lila rises from her seat. Each step toward the stage feels like walking toward her own execution, but refusing would create more questions than compliance. The auditorium falls silent, except for the sound of her footsteps echoing against the walls. Madison greets her with a warm hug that looks supportive to observers, but feels like a predator's embrace to Lila. Everyone, let's give Lila another round of applause for her courage, Madison announces, and the auditorium obliges with enthusiasm. Now, Madison continues, turning toward Lila with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes, I thought it would be wonderful if you could teach us some basic sign language. Nothing complicated, just a few simple words that might help us communicate better. The request seems reasonable, even thoughtful to the watching audience. But Lila understands the calculated cruelty behind it. Madison is demanding that she perform her disability for entertainment, that she prove her deafness through elaborate gestures while hundreds of people watch and judge. Lila's hands remain at her sides. She can feel sweat beading on her forehead, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird, desperate for escape. The silence stretches, becomes uncomfortable, transforms into something approaching awkwardness. "It's okay," Madison says soothingly. "I know this is overwhelming. Let me help." She turns to the audience and begins making exaggerated hand gestures, crude approximations of sign language that border on mockery. "This is how you say hello," she announces, her movements theatrical and imprecise. "And this is thank you." Several students in the audience begin mimicking her gestures, treating sign language like a party trick or casual entertainment. The auditorium fills with the sound of nervous laughter and whispered commentary as 400 people attempt to communicate in a language none of them actually understand. But Madison isn't finished. She turns back to Lila with her most devastating weapon yet. "You know what?" Madison says, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. "I bet Lila could even tell us what we're saying wrong. After all, she reads lips, right? So she can see when we're not signing correctly." The comment seems innocent enough, but it's actually a precision strike aimed at the heart of Lila's deception. Madison is testing whether Lila will maintain her performance even when directly challenged about her supposed abilities. "Go ahead, Lila," Madison encourages. "Correct my signing. Show everyone the right way to communicate." The moment stretches like a rubber band approaching its breaking point. Lila stands frozen at center stage, caught between the impossible choice of performing her lie or revealing her truth. 400 people wait expectantly for her response, their faces bright with curiosity and educational enthusiasm. But Madison has one final card to play. She leans close to the microphone, her voice dropping to what she clearly believes is a whisper, quiet enough that someone who truly couldn't hear would miss it entirely. "Come on, deaf girl," Madison murmurs. "Show us what you've got." The words slice through the auditorium's relative quiet like a blade through silk. To most of the audience, they sound like encouraging whispers. But to Lila, they land like physical blows, each syllable precisely aimed to wound and humiliate. And in that moment, something inside Lila's carefully constructed fortress finally snaps. 7 years of silence shatter like glass against stone. 7 years of swallowed words, suppressed screams, and suffocated truth explode outward with the force of a dam bursting. The protective walls she built around her voice crumble under the weight of accumulated pain and rage. "Stop!" The word erupts from Lila's throat with volcanic force, amplified by the auditorium's sound system until it reverberates off every wall like thunder. Clear, strong, unmistakably articulate, the voice of someone who has never had trouble hearing or speaking, who has been listening and understanding every word spoken around her for years. The auditorium falls into absolute silence. 400 students and 24 faculty members sit frozen in shock, their minds struggling to process what they've just witnessed. The girl they knew as deaf, the quiet, withdrawn figure who communicated through gestures and written notes, has just spoken with perfect clarity and devastating volume. Madison's face transforms from triumphant confidence to pale shock in the space of a heartbeat. Her carefully orchestrated performance has backfired spectacularly, revealing not Lila's weakness, but her own miscalculation. But Lila isn't finished. 7 years of silence have given way to 7 years of words demanding their freedom. "I said stop!" she repeats, her voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium. "Stop pretending this is about inclusion. Stop pretending you care about deaf culture. Stop pretending any of this is about helping me." Principal Rodriguez starts to move toward the stage, but Lila's voice stops him in his tracks. There's something in her tone, raw, powerful, undeniably authentic, that freezes everyone in place. "You want to know about my world?" Lila continues, her voice finding its rhythm after years of enforced silence. "You want to understand what it's like to be different? Let me tell you what I've learned from 3 years of watching this school, listening to every conversation, hearing every cruel comment you thought I couldn't understand." The confession hits the audience like a physical wave. Students gasp, teachers exchange bewildered glances, and Madison stands paralyzed at center stage as her perfect trap collapses around her. "I can hear everything," Lila announces, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Every whispered insult, every casual cruelty, every time you discussed me like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person to be respected. I heard it all." She turns to face Madison directly, and when she speaks again, her voice carries the accumulated power of 7 years of observation, analysis, and careful documentation. "And you, Madison Clark, are about to learn what happens when the person you've been tormenting turns out to have perfect hearing and an absolutely perfect memory." The auditorium erupts into chaos, students shouting questions, teachers calling for order, administrators rushing toward the stage. But above it all, Lila's voice cuts through the noise with crystalline clarity, finally free after years of imposed silence. The earthquake has begun, and nothing at Meadowfield High will ever be the same again. But what Lila is about to reveal next will make this moment seem like a gentle tremor compared to the devastating truth that's about to reshape everything her classmates thought they knew about their school, their teachers, and themselves. The auditorium has transformed into something between a courtroom and a confessional. 400 students sit in stunned silence, their phones recording every word, as Lila Bennett, the girl they thought they knew, stands at center stage with the power of 7 years of accumulated secrets blazing in her eyes. Principal Rodriguez attempts to restore order, but his voice seems small and ineffective against the magnitude of what's unfolding. "Lila, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No!" Lila's voice cuts through his diplomatic deflection like a sword through silk. "Privacy is what got us here. Privacy is what let this happen. Everyone wants to understand my world. Let me show you exactly what I've been watching." She turns toward Madison, who stands frozen beside her like a deer caught in headlights. Gone is the confident queen of Meadowfield High, replaced by someone who suddenly realizes she's been playing chess with someone who could see the entire board while she was still learning the rules. "Madison Clark," Lila announces, her voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium with crystalline clarity, "President of Student Council, honor roll student, volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends, college-bound with a full scholarship to Northwestern." The recitation sounds like a resume, but there's something ominous in Lila's tone that makes the achievements feel like accusations waiting to happen. "What everyone doesn't know," Lila continues, "is how Madison maintains her perfect image. Should I tell them about the Adderall you sell to stressed students during finals week? Or the way you've been hacking into the school's grading system to change test scores? Not just yours, but your friends too?" Madison's face drains of all color. You can't prove." "October 15th, Lila interrupts with surgical precision. "Computer lab, 3rd period. You thought Mr. Peterson left for his coffee break, but he came back early. He saw you changing Jessica's chemistry grade from a C to a B+. You convinced him to stay quiet by offering to write a recommendation letter for his daughter's college application, using your father's connections at Northwestern. The specific details land like physical blows. Mr. Peterson, sitting in the faculty section, goes rigid in his chair. Several students turn to stare at him, and his guilty expression confirms everything Lila has revealed. "But that's just the beginning," Lila says, her voice gaining momentum like an avalanche gathering speed. Should we talk about how you've been stealing from the animal shelter's fundraising account? Small amounts, nothing that would trigger an audit, but enough to pay for those designer clothes you claim your parents buy you. Jessica Martinez, Madison's closest ally, gasps audibly from her seat. She's been Madison's accomplice in the fundraising theft, and the terror in her eyes suggests she knows exactly what other secrets might be revealed. Or, Lila continues relentlessly, should we discuss the real reason Taylor Brooks joined your group? Not because she wanted friends, but because you're blackmailing her with photos from that party last spring, the ones where she was drunk and unconscious while certain football players decided to have some fun. The auditorium erupts in whispers and gasps. Taylor, sitting in the front row, begins crying, not from shame, but from relief that someone finally knows the truth about her torment. Several teachers immediately reach for their phones, recognizing the legal implications of what Lila has just revealed. But Lila isn't targeting just Madison. 7 years of careful observation have given her a comprehensive understanding of Meadowfield High's hidden ecosystem of corruption, abuse, and willful blindness. "Mrs. Patterson," Lila calls out, turning toward the mathematics department head. "You've been accepting bribes from parents to change their children's grades. Not money, that would be too obvious. Gift cards, expensive wine, donations to your son's baseball team. Should I list the specific amounts and dates?" Mrs. Patterson stands abruptly as if preparing to flee, but Principal Rodriguez gestures for her to remain seated. The damage is already done. Her guilt is written across her face in letters large enough for everyone to read. "Coach Williams," Lila continues, her voice never wavering from its matter-of-fact tone, "you've been providing steroids to varsity athletes and teaching them how to cycle off before drug tests. You justify it by saying you're helping kids get college scholarships, but really you're just protecting your win-loss record and your job security. Coach Williams, a man who has intimidated students and parents for years with his aggressive demeanor, looks like he's about to be sick." Several of his star athletes sink lower in their seats, suddenly understanding that their secret pharmaceutical assistance is no longer secret. But Lila's most devastating revelations are yet to come. "Mr. Davidson," she says, addressing the English teacher who has always prided himself on being a student advocate, "you've been having an inappropriate relationship with senior Melissa Torres for 6 months. You convinced her it was mentoring and preparing her for college, but we both know what happens during those after-school tutoring sessions when your classroom door is locked." The accusation hits like a bomb. Melissa, a quiet senior who has struggled with confidence and family problems, begins sobbing uncontrollably. Mr. Davidson leaps to his feet, his face flushed with rage and panic. "That's completely false!" he shouts. "This girl is obviously having some kind of breakdown." "November 3rd, Lila interrupts calmly. "You told her that physical affection was part of building trust between mentor and student. You said successful people need to learn how to use all their assets. You said if she really wanted that recommendation letter for her scholarship application, she needed to show her gratitude more concretely." The specific quotes, delivered in Lila's unflinching voice, carry the ring of absolute truth. Mr. Davidson's denials die in his throat as he realizes that someone has been listening to every word of his predatory manipulation. Have you ever wondered what secrets people would reveal if they thought no one was listening? The truth is, we're all performing different versions of ourselves, and Lila's about to show everyone just how thin those masks really are. Principal Rodriguez finally finds his voice, but it comes out as a croak. "Lila, these are very serious accusations." "They're not accusations," Lila corrects him. "They're observations. And if you want evidence, I can provide it. Dates, times, direct quotes, financial records I've photographed, text messages I've seen over shoulders, private conversations I've overheard. 7 years of perfect hearing and perfect memory, Principal Rodriguez. 7 years of watching this school enable corruption and abuse while treating me like I was too disabled to matter. She pauses, letting the weight of her words settle over the auditorium like a suffocating blanket. But the most disgusting part, Lila continues, isn't what individuals have done. It's how the system protects them. How many teachers have reported their suspicions about inappropriate relationships and been told to mind their own business? How many students have tried to report bullying, theft, or abuse and been dismissed because their accusations targeted popular students or influential families? She turns toward the faculty section, her gaze sweeping across teachers who have spent years looking the other way, administrators who have prioritized reputation over responsibility, staff members who have chosen silence over student safety. Mrs. Chen, you knew about Mr. Davidson and Melissa. You saw them together, heard her crying in the bathroom, noticed her personality changes. But you never reported it because you didn't want to destroy a good teacher's career over teenage drama. Mrs. Chen, the school counselor, covers her face with her hands. Her complicity in the abuse is now public knowledge, her professional negligence exposed for everyone to judge. Nurse Williams, you've been covering up evidence of steroid use for 3 years. Athletes come to you with symptoms, side effects, health problems directly related to performance-enhancing drugs, and you treat the symptoms while ignoring the cause. How many kids have you helped Coach Williams poison? The systematic exposure continues like dominoes falling in sequence. Each revelation triggers another, creating a cascade of accountability that the school's power structure has successfully avoided for years. Lila's perfect memory and years of careful observation have given her a comprehensive map of institutional failure, personal corruption, and collective complicity. Vice Principal Stevens, you've been taking kickbacks from the vending machine company to ensure their exclusive contract renewal, even though their products fail to meet the nutritional standards required by state law. Ms. Rodriguez in the cafeteria, you've been selling food from the school supply to local restaurants and pocketing the profits while kids eat smaller portions and lower quality meals. Security guard Thompson, you've been selling hall passes and detention exemptions to students whose parents slip you cash during pickup. Each name, each accusation, each specific detail builds toward an inescapable conclusion. Meadowfield High School is thoroughly corrupted at every level, and everyone with power has been either participating in the corruption or enabling it through willful blindness. But Lila saves her most devastating revelation for last. And you, Principal Rodriguez, she says, turning toward the man who has spent the last 10 minutes watching his school's reputation disintegrate in real time. You've known about most of this. The grade changes, the inappropriate relationships, the financial improprieties, the systematic abuse of students. You have reports, complaints, documentation going back years. But you've buried every investigation, silenced every whistleblower, and protected every perpetrator, because scandal would hurt the school's image and your career advancement. Principal Rodriguez looks like a man watching his entire world collapse. His face is gray, his hands trembling, his carefully maintained authority crumbling under the weight of Lila's accusations. The filing cabinet in your office, Lila continues relentlessly. Second drawer, green folder marked personnel issues. It contains documented complaints about Mr. Davidson dating back 18 months, evidence of Coach Williams' drug distribution, financial irregularities you've been instructed to ignore by the school board. You kept the evidence to protect yourself politically, but you never acted on it to protect students. The specific details make denial impossible. Lila isn't guessing or exaggerating. She's reporting facts with the precision of a court stenographer and the moral authority of someone who has been systematically wronged by the institution she's now dismantling. Madison, forgotten in the chaos of institutional exposure, tries to edge toward the stage exit, but Lila's voice stops her cold. Where are you going, Madison? We're not finished discussing your contribution to this culture of cruelty and corruption. Madison freezes, realizing that her attempted escape has only drawn more attention to her complicity in the systemic failures Lila has been exposing. "You want to know the real tragedy?" Lila asks, her voice softening slightly but losing none of its power. "I could have been your ally. I could have been the person who helped you become better, who supported you when you struggled, who celebrated your genuine achievements. Instead, you chose to see me as a target, a victim, someone whose pain could be your entertainment." The personal dimension of the betrayal hits harder than any of the institutional accusations. Madison has spent weeks systematically destroying someone who posed no threat to her, someone who could have been a friend instead of an enemy. "But here's what you never understood," Lila continues, her voice building toward its final crescendo. "When you choose cruelty over kindness, when you exploit perceived weakness instead of offering strength, when you build your power on others' pain, you don't just hurt your victims, you reveal exactly who you are when nobody's watching." She pauses, looking out over the auditorium filled with students and faculty who have spent years participating in or enabling the culture she's just exposed. Except somebody was always watching, somebody was always listening, and today everybody gets to see what this place really looks like when the masks come off. The silence that follows is absolute, broken only by the sound of phones buzzing as recordings of Lila's revelations begin spreading across social media platforms, carrying the truth about Meadowfield High far beyond the walls of its auditorium. But as powerful as this moment of accountability is, Lila knows that speaking the truth is only the beginning. The real question is what happens next. Whether this exposure leads to genuine change or just better hidden corruption. Whether her revelations spark justice or merely more sophisticated retaliation. The girl who spent 7 years in silence has finally found her voice, but the story is far from over. 3 weeks after the earthquake that shattered Meadowfield High, the landscape looks entirely different. The auditorium where Lila Bennett found her voice has become legendary, not just within the school, but across the nation, as recordings of her revelations spread like wildfire through social media, news outlets, and educational forums worldwide. The immediate aftermath was swift and merciless. Principal Rodriguez submitted his resignation within 48 hours, though not before federal investigators seized the contents of that green folder Lila had mentioned with such devastating precision. Mr. Davidson was arrested on charges of sexual misconduct with a minor, his mentoring relationship with Melissa Torres revealed as the predatory manipulation Lila had exposed. Coach Williams faced both criminal charges for drug distribution and a lifetime ban from coaching at any educational institution. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Chen, and 6 other faculty members found themselves unemployed, their careers destroyed by their complicity in the culture of corruption and abuse that Lila's perfect memory had so methodically documented. The school board, faced with undeniable evidence of systemic failure, implemented emergency reforms and brought in an entirely new administrative team. But the most dramatic transformation belonged to Madison Clark. The queen of Meadowfield High fell harder and faster than anyone could have imagined. Her scholarship to Northwestern was revoked within a week, her college dreams crumbling under the weight of her exposed crimes. The animal shelter filed theft charges, the school district launched a criminal investigation into the grade hacking, and her parents, prominent members of the community, found themselves facing both legal bills and social exile. Yet perhaps the most devastating consequence for Madison was simpler than any legal punishment. She had become exactly what she had tried to make Lila: invisible, isolated, a cautionary tale that other students whispered about but refused to engage with directly. But this story isn't really about revenge, though justice was certainly served. It's about something more profound. The moment when someone who has been systematically silenced finally finds the courage to speak and discovers that their voice has the power to change everything. Lila sits in the same cafeteria where Madison once spilled ink across her sketchbook, but the atmosphere has transformed completely. Students approach her table now, not with the exaggerated sympathy reserved for disabled peers, but with genuine respect for someone who risked everything to tell the truth. Her new sketchbook is filled with different kinds of drawings, portraits of her classmates, architectural studies of the school building, abstract pieces that capture hope instead of despair. Lila, the voice belongs to Marcus Chen, her former chemistry partner, but his tone has changed completely. Gone is the patronizing, careful speech he once used with someone he believed was deaf. Now he addresses her as an equal, which, she realizes, is all she ever wanted. "I wanted to thank you," Marcus continues, sitting across from her without invitation. "My sister Emma is a sophomore, and she told me that nobody's been bullying her since your speech. It's like the whole social dynamic shifted. People are actually looking out for each other now." It's true. The toxic ecosystem that allowed predators like Madison to thrive has been replaced by something unprecedented at Meadowfield High: genuine community. Students who once participated in or ignored bullying now actively intervene when they see cruelty. Teachers who once protected their careers by staying silent now speak up when they witness injustice. The fear-based culture that enabled systemic abuse has been replaced by accountability and mutual support. Melissa Torres approaches their table, and Lila sees a young woman who has been fundamentally changed by having her truth acknowledged and believed. The shy, vulnerable senior who had been manipulated by Mr. Davidson has transformed into a fierce advocate for student safety. "I wanted you to know," Melissa says, her voice stronger than Lila has ever heard it, "that I'm testifying at Davidson's trial next month, and I'm starting a support group for students who've experienced inappropriate relationships with faculty. Would you consider helping us? Not as the girl who exposed everything, but as someone who understands what it feels like to carry secrets that feel too heavy to share." The request touches something deep in Lila's heart. For 7 years, she carried the weight of trauma alone, using silence as both shield and prison. Now she has the opportunity to help others find their voices without having to endure years of isolation first. "I'd be honored," Lila responds, and means it completely. The ripple effects of Lila's revelation extend far beyond Meadowfield High. News outlets across the country picked up the story, fascinated by the dramatic reversal. The supposedly disabled student who turned out to be the most observant person in the building, the bullying victim who became an agent of justice, the silent witness who finally spoke with devastating effect. But the media attention brings unexpected challenges. Lila finds herself fielding interview requests from journalists who want to sensationalize her story, disability rights advocates who feel betrayed by her deception, and educational experts who want to use her experience to promote various reforms. "You don't owe anyone your story," Mrs. Henderson reminds her over dinner one evening. "You've already done more than anyone could expect. You don't have to become a poster child for every cause that wants to claim you." Her foster mother's wisdom provides exactly the grounding Lila needs. She chooses her platform carefully, agreeing to interviews that focus on systemic change rather than personal drama, speaking at educational conferences about the importance of listening to marginalized voices, and working with anti-bullying organizations to develop programs that actually address root causes rather than symptoms. 1 month after the auditorium revelation, Lila receives an unexpected visitor at the Henderson home. Taylor Brooks stands on the front porch, looking nervous but determined. "I know I don't deserve your time," Taylor begins, "but I needed to apologize. Not just for what Madison did, but for what I didn't do. I was so trapped in my own situation that I never tried to help you, even though I could see what was happening." Lila invites her in, recognizing in Taylor's haunted expression the same trauma she's been carrying for years. They talk for hours about the photos Madison used for blackmail, about the culture of fear that made speaking up seem impossible, about the healing process that follows exposure of long-held secrets. "I've been seeing a therapist," Taylor explains, "learning about trauma responses, about why we sometimes freeze instead of fight or flee. She helped me understand that survival isn't the same as living." The conversation becomes a turning point for both young women. Taylor begins attending Melissa's support group, while Lila finally starts seeing a counselor herself, not to address a disability she never had, but to process the genuine trauma that created her protective silence in the first place. Dr. Sarah Williams, the trauma specialist recommended by the school district, helps Lila understand that her 7-year performance wasn't just deception. It was a sophisticated survival strategy developed by a child who witnessed something no person should ever have to see. "You weren't lying," Dr. Williams explains during one of their sessions. "You were protecting yourself the only way you knew how." The 10-year-old, who watched her mother die, made the best decision she could with the information and resources available to her. The 17-year-old, who found her voice in that auditorium, made a different decision because she had developed different resources. The therapy helps Lila understand that healing doesn't require forgetting the past or pretending the trauma never happened. Instead, it means integrating the experience into a larger narrative of survival, growth, and ultimately transformation. 6 months after the auditorium revelation, Meadowfield High looks like a completely different institution. The new principal, Dr. Martinez, has implemented comprehensive reforms: mandatory reporting training for all staff, anonymous reporting systems for students, regular audits of financial processes, and zero-tolerance policies for academic dishonesty and inappropriate relationships. But the most significant change is cultural. The toxic hierarchy that allowed bullying to flourish has been replaced by a community that values authenticity over popularity, kindness over cruelty, and truth over comfortable fiction. Students who once competed to tear each other down now collaborate to build each other up. Lila's role in this transformation has evolved as well. No longer the silent observer or the explosive truth-teller, she has become something more sustainable. A bridge between the hearing and deaf communities, an advocate for students with invisible disabilities, and a living reminder that everyone has a story worth hearing. She's also become something she never expected: genuinely popular. Not with the artificial popularity that Madison once wielded like a weapon, but with the authentic respect that comes from using power responsibly and standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves. The final scene of this remarkable story takes place in the same auditorium where Lila first found her voice, but the occasion is entirely different. It's graduation day, and Lila stands at the podium as valedictorian, not because of special accommodations or pity, but because her academic performance has always been exceptional, hidden beneath the assumption that disabled students couldn't compete with their hearing peers. "When I was 10 years old," Lila begins, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the auditorium, "I made a decision that shaped the next 7 years of my life. I chose silence because the world had become too dangerous to engage with directly. I built walls to protect myself, and for a long time, those walls served their purpose. The audience, students, faculty, families, and community members listens with the kind of attention rarely given to graduation speeches. They know they're hearing from someone who has lived through extraordinary circumstances and emerged with wisdom worth sharing. But walls built for protection can become prisons if we never learn when it's safe to tear them down. The greatest tragedy isn't that I was bullied, or that corruption existed in our school, or even that good people sometimes make bad choices. The greatest tragedy would have been if I had stayed silent forever, if I had let fear convince me that my voice didn't matter." She pauses, looking out over the faces of classmates who have journeyed with her from ignorance through revelation to transformation. Every person in this auditorium has a voice that matters. Every person has observations worth sharing, experiences worth honoring, truth worth telling. The question isn't whether you have something important to say, you do. The question is whether you'll find the courage to say it when the moment comes. Leela's gaze finds familiar faces in the crowd. Marcus, who has become a genuine friend. Melissa, who now leads peer counseling programs. Taylor, who speaks publicly about consent and healthy relationships. Even some of Madison's former followers, who have learned to value authenticity over status. To my classmates who will go on to become teachers, administrators, parents, and community leaders, remember that the quietest person in the room might also be the most observant. The student who seems different might have perspectives you desperately need to hear. The person you're tempted to dismiss or diminish might be the one who saves you from your own blind spots. If this story has touched your heart, think about the quiet voices in your own community. Who have you overlooked? Who might be carrying truths that could transform your understanding of the world? 7 years ago, I thought silence was my only option. Today, I know that voice is my greatest gift, not just my ability to speak, but my responsibility to use that ability in service of truth, justice, and human dignity. She takes a breath, feeling the weight and privilege of this moment. Standing where she once shattered her own carefully constructed fiction, now helping others build authentic lives. Class of 2025, as we leave Meadowfield High and enter the wider world, I challenge you to remember this. Your voice has power. Your observations matter. Your truth can change everything. Don't wait 7 years to share it with the world. The standing ovation that follows isn't just appreciation for a well-delivered speech. It's recognition of a young woman who transformed personal trauma into collective healing, who turned individual pain into institutional change, who proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth. As Lila steps down from the podium, she passes the spot where Madison once tried to humiliate her into performing her disability. The irony isn't lost on her. The place where she was meant to be diminished became the launching pad for her transformation. The moment designed to silence her forever became the moment she found her true voice. Madison Clark is not in the audience. She's spending her summer working at a rehabilitation center for troubled youth, beginning her own long journey toward understanding the difference between power and strength, between control and leadership, between causing pain and healing from it. Whether she'll complete that journey successfully remains to be seen, but at least she's begun. The real victory isn't Madison's downfall. It's the culture of accountability and kindness that has replaced the toxic ecosystem she once ruled. It's the students who now speak up instead of staying silent. It's the adults who now listen instead of dismissing. It's the institution that now protects instead of enabling. Most importantly, it's the understanding that every person, disabled or not, popular or isolated, powerful or vulnerable, deserves to be heard, respected, and valued for who they truly are, rather than who others assume them to be. Lila Bennett spent 7 years learning to navigate the world in silence. Now she's spending the rest of her life teaching others the power of using their voices wisely, courageously, and in service of truth. And that, perhaps, is the most beautiful sound of all. If this story has moved you, share in the comments what touched your heart the most. And send this video to someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, that their truth has power, and that silence doesn't have to be forever.